Good evening.
Evening.
Good evening. Welcome to the December 17, 2018 Board of Education meeting. Could we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Baum,
Here.
Mr. Laude,
Here.
Ms. Livingston. Here.
Here.
Ms. Munsell. Here. Mr. Metz.
Here.
Ms. Parsons.
Here.
Ms. Savage-Williams.
Here. Thank you. Okay, the first item on the agenda is written communication. Dr. Davis, do we have any written communication?
We have no written communication at this time.
All right, no written communication. Kind of stalling a little bit. A couple of our board members are trying to get their technology going. It's a little slow tonight. So the first item, item number 5, is the report on student services and student well-being.
Yes, and I'm going to invite our associate principal, Taya Kinsey, to come forward, and Dr. Campbell, and they're going to actually do this presentation and then have an opportunity to discuss whatever the board wants to do to follow up.
All right, so good evening. My name is Taya Kinsey. I'm Associate Principal for Student Services, and Dr. Campbell and I are excited to report on school goal number 2, well-being, on behalf of the Student Services Department, but also on behalf of our entire school as we continue to move forward with school-wide efforts. We also, in the name of well-being, want to recognize that we're trying to have breadth and depth about all these efforts, and yet we're also recognizing that this is the week before break, and for well-being, we'll try to make it as short and sweet as possible, but there's no guarantees. So looking at the fact that we're considering well-being and interdependence. So our first focus at ETHS is on learning, supported by well-being, and we recognize we can't do any of that alone. Mahatma Gandhi's said, interdependence is and ought to be as much as the ideal of humans as self-sufficiency. And we agree. As a school, as teams, and as a department all year long, you can see all year long, we've worked on continuing practices, creating new practices, and that includes family events, staff professional development, awareness weeks and curriculum, at all grade levels and groups. And you can see we've named a few of the many topics that we have continued to address and created new opportunities around bullying and harassment, sexual harassment and assault, shifting our culture of consent, LGBTQ+ youth, substance use, child abuse, our commitment to race and equity and excellence, and really thinking about all the facets of mental health, prevention, crisis care team responses, and then, of course, the many financial aid, college, career, and academic planning opportunities, just to name a few.
So we work really hard to maintain a student-centered approach in all of what we do, and on our commitment to equity with and for our staff and students. Our staff has had a tremendous impact on the outcomes of well-being, and with the staff focusing on well-being, all of our decisions and learning and engagement, that is the theme that keeps coming through with our decision making and how we have been engaging with students and how we engage with each other. This is one of the reasons why at the beginning of the school year I talked about a focus on well-being, because we want to make sure that ETHS is emotionally safe, physically safe, but also that the social, emotional component of our school is also one of safety. And that includes workload, that includes decision-making, that includes our reaction to the human experience, be it grief, be it a number of range of things and emotions, human emotions and interaction. We really want to make sure that our commitment to ourselves, taking care of ourselves, and taking care of our students is a top priority. So this group of staff members helps to support students, and sometimes together, sometimes individually, sometimes directly, and other times indirectly. And our students have wonderful stories about them. I can recall many anecdotes of teachers and students who have interactions where the student has felt that they haven't had a connection with an adult in the school, and they finally find a teacher or a coach or a mentor that they have been connecting with that they didn't know that they had shared interests. And those are some of the things that our staff has been doing with this, around this theme of well-being and being connected and being student-centered. And so I've just been very proud of the staff for going above and beyond in some of those efforts. I host a Student of the Month breakfast every month for the past 6 years, and every month there are staff members who have nominated students for the Student of the Month award, and a lot of times it's academic and a lot of times it's not, but within that conversation there's this sense of relationship and this sense of this reciprocity of gratitude between the student and the staff member that's just, it brings tears to my eyes every month. So throughout this presentation, we will show you pictures of WOW Kits to keep us centered in our work, and that's students. They're not about numbers or percentages, even though these numbers reflect the achievement of these goals. And our students come together as a group of WOW Kits. They also are amazing individual human beings. Each one of our students have their own experiences and identities and ideas about changing their worlds. They all have their strengths, and we know that they all bring something very special and unique to ETHS. So last year, we had a campaign to just impact our school culture. It was at the end of the year, and we were all feeling a little stressed. And so, in one day, I had a conversation. It was one day. Yep. I had a conversation with the administrative team about what we could do to just make sure that every student in the school got a positive message. And I sent that email to staff, I want to say maybe 10 o'clock in the morning, and the goal was to put a Post-it note on every single locker in this school. It's well over 3,000, close to 4,000 lockers in this school. And so staff volunteered in an afternoon, Dr. Witherspoon helped, to write a personal note on every single locker overnight. This was not something that we had planned to do. It's something that we simply wanted to do to get done, and the response was great. So these messages were simple, but included things like, yes, Queen, you are great. You are the sunshine. You've got this. Believe in yourself. Don't give up. You are amazing. Be the best person you can be, and make it a great day. We know that kindness and our words matter, and they impact well-being, and how students show up in class and how they show up with each other impacts our culture, and impacts the climate, and impacts well-being. And I can tell you that there were a lot of students that morning in the spring where we had this particular campaign, who were very just elated and surprised to get such a positive note on their locker that morning.
So when we look at outcome measures of attendance and well-being, we know that those acts of kindness increase the sense of belonging, increase our attendance rate. And so we have great news looking at the increase to 97%, as you can see, for our annual average daily attendance rate. We're pleased also that our chronic truancy rate has decreased from 12.6 in 2017 to 11.7 in 2018. Even all of those things said, we're also really happy about our continued commitment to holding on to our students through those truancy periods. And so as we do that, that means lots of interventions, that means lots of wrapping around, but it also means that our 5-year graduation rate has continued to increase to 95%. And there are many reasons for this, including our alt school, with a total of 122 students having graduated from ETHS through their involvement at some point in time with the alt school. And also notable, as we're talking about graduation on a separate note, we are also pleased about our 4-year graduation rate at 92%, and that within the class of 2018, 121 black males graduated from ETHS last spring, and we continue to celebrate all of their efforts as well. When we look at our outcome measure of extracurricular activities, and in this case for our outcome measure, we are looking at all the ways that you can be engaged and connected to ETHS, the clubs, fine arts, and or sports, at least one or more of those. And we're really happy to note because that definition of connection and well-being has to do with how connected you are to the school through these measures. 74% of our students participate in one or more clubs, fine arts, and/or sports. And keeping us centered, going back to our students here, United We Go Farther, because we are wild kids. So these are just a few more pictures to keep us grounded in why are we here? We're here because of our students and doing some amazing things. Looking ahead, when we are thinking about connecting to resources, one of the things that we have seen is that Dr. Witherspoon, to quote Dr. Witherspoon, it's a great day to be a wild kid, and we do believe that every day is a great day to be a wild kid. But that doesn't mean that there aren't challenges that come along with it, and that some days are harder than others. And as we have continued to measure our official social work referrals, and that means really formal official social work referrals from parents and guardians, from staff, and through programs, you can see that that has grown exponentially, over 78% increase to 419 social work referrals last school year. What that means is that 1 in 9 students were referred for official social work services. That doesn't account for all the self-referrals. That doesn't account for all of the walk-ins. And it also doesn't reflect here the fact that what we are seeing from our data, even reflecting on our first quarter data, is that our student enrollment by race is also reflected in the services provided in the mental health, by the mental health professionals within ETHS, ensuring that we are seeing access for all students. Looking at the referrals doesn't really account for the number of office visits. And that's why we made a point of highlighting that. 3,665 social emotional office visits is the quarterly average. The bulk of those you can see are through the social workers, and then supplementary supports through psychologists as well as through the counselors. And this increase really is reflective of nationwide trends, both from the number of needs as well as the complexity of the needs. Perfect. What we have seen in terms of the complexity is a lot of multiple needs. Trauma, health complications, McKinney-Vento needs, legal, crisis, DCFS, among so many others. So as an example, in our health services, our nurse's office, almost 13,000 visits last school year. I'm often there, and I'm always surprised that it seems like there's a flow, and yet the increase, we continue to see the increase of need. Just on health alone, 550 students with plans related to medical needs were serviced, and concussions rose 65% to over 109 students. So there's a reason our strong concussion protocol is in place and serving students. When we look at psychiatric hospitalizations through our pre- and post-hospitalization program, our PHP, that has decreased. So over 2 years, from 99 to 91, down to 79. And we're really pleased about that. So I want to pause there for a moment. Prevention is so important. We have received so much support from staff and from referrals from parents that we were able to do a lot of early intervention and prevention. So we're really happy about that decrease, but we also recognize that the needs are getting more complicated. And we see that in the fact that our number of students who have been hospitalized more than once and are participating in the PHP program have increased by 24%, up from 14% the year before. We wanted to note also our McKinney-Vento students, and they're supporting them within 191 students. It's a lot of support through our community resources, through our McKinney-Vento committees, through a variety of service providers here in the school, as well as the teachers bending over backwards for students. And then lastly, when we're thinking about complicated situations, our number of clear and present danger cases, potential harm to self or others, reflecting on that within the school, has increased 27% in 2 years. The next slide is talking to us about the outcome measure of behavior referrals. And so I want to be clear with everyone that these behavior referrals are not a reflection of suspensions. These are not identifying the specific consequences. These are measuring the number of actual referrals that are noting a formal concern about behavior. So it's important to note, 79% of all students moving toward the outcome measure of no behavior referrals. That's amazing, 79%. And then when we take into consideration just no more than one referral, 83% of all students earned no more than one referral. So it's a tremendous number of students. Then when we look at the data and break it down further in terms of need, we see that 2% of all students actually earned 43% of all the behavior referrals. And that's consistent with what we've been working on all the prevention for our largest student population, as well as the fact that we have a few students who have much higher needs. And we've been working on all of this, on the behavior, on the social emotional ends, looking at how do we engage in classrooms, how do we engage in the hallways, study centers, offices, cafeterias, all these different spaces, and continuing to come together with large teams, everyone from the truancy officer to safety members, teachers, social workers, psychologists, counselors, all, and administrators, often pairing directly with students to help them. We've also been working on developing our restorative practices framework, including restorative conversations among us. We often talk about restorative practices in relation to alternative to suspensions, but we've been broadening that because restorative conversations, we've been broadening to us having it with each other, about taking accountability with each other, about having empathy with each other as staff members and making plans and doing the same thing with our students, and that's been met with success. We also have, in terms of the crisis intervention and individual supports, as well as alternative to suspensions. In addition to all those things, social workers, psychologists, and counselors led over 49 groups last school year throughout the entire school year. So lots of good things happening.
So we're doing our best to honor the work of our students, as well as to see them and acknowledge them and to support them. So well-being is directly related to our ability to learn and our academic functioning, many students' academic functioning at ETHS, and our many programs at ETHS support them. So 87% of students maintained or increased their GPA in 2018, and 73 of our 2018 black males applied to college, or 60% of our 2018 class of black males. Our students are focused on college and career plans, and transcripts reflected thus far in the school year is 3,077.
All right, as we look forward, we're thinking a lot about connecting the dots, as you can see here. But we also recognize that we are not dots, we're individuals who come together every day. When you account for both ourselves and students, that we're not quite 1,000,000 points of light, we're about 4,200 points of light to connect with each other, to connect with students, and to connect students to resources. We definitely remain committed to doing school-wide prevention efforts and to intervention, and that's why we're looking at all these components. Some of the things that we're going to be highlighting this school year have to do with our signs of suicide curriculum and screening that we're going to be initiating this spring, as well as our new well-being survey this spring. Another shift that we're moving towards is really embodying acknowledge, care, tell. Instead of see something, say something. And acknowledge, care, tell is for all of us to message to all students, to each other. That means if you're concerned about yourself or someone else with regard to harm or potential danger, acknowledge it, care, and tell someone. So that's a positive shift from looking in a different way. We also are beginning to roll out our student success plans through our first ever student success plans, increasing our communication with staff when we're making plans for students who have at-risk flags together. Also wanted to note, to steal a quote from our FASH book, the playbook, where First Lady Michelle Obama was quoted, "There is no magic to achievement. It's really about hard work, choices, and persistence." That feeds very nicely into our student agency, the power to make changes. and Dr. Campbell is going to set us up with the video. And while he's doing that, I'm going to share, we really believe that student agency has a direct relationship to well-being, really giving space for voice and the power to change and to help make this world a better place. We believe that all of us have to be united in this and that we are the solution. Before we close, what Dr. Campbell's queuing up is actually a video created by the student and staff collaboration on the Sexual Assault Awareness Committee, and of course, William Jenkins, who's in the back, sitting quietly with the headphones on, so I had to give him a quick shout out. This is an example of one of the ways that we've worked to shift our culture of consent, and we've featured it now during our Sexual Assault Awareness Month, as well as in our PE curriculum through Building Healthy Relationships. So we're ready.
Hashtag we are the solution. Hashtag everyone's problem. Hashtag not asking for it. Hashtag culture of consent. Hashtag me too. Hashtag no excuse. Hashtag yes means yes. Hashtag start talking. Hashtag time's up. Hashtag change the conversation, change the world. Hashtag speak up. Hashtag no more. Hashtag Wild Kit Way.
Consent is mandatory.
Consent is enthusiastic.
Consent is mutual.
Consent is given freely.
Consent is honest.
Consent is verbal.
Consent is consensual.
Consent is ongoing.
Consent is revocable.
Consent is universal.
Consent is not a gray area.
Consent is reversible.
Consent is never implied.
Consent is respect. Consent is sober.
Consent is not silence.
Consent is clear.
Consent is coherent.
Consent is active.
Consent is communication.
Consent is yes means yes.
Masculine, feminine, the spectrum in between. The colors of humanity reflected in a beam. All bodies are beautiful, but bodies like souls get damaged by those who intimidate, hate, and take advantage. Harassment steals dignity, leaving scars of shame and lasting emotional and physical pain. Whether verbal, cyber, physical, in private settings, or at work, harassment has many forms, but always brings hurt. Contact is consensual. Consent is a must. Respect is essential. Be someone others trust. Be sisters and brothers, lovers, friends, and fam. Cherish the ones you touch and lend a helping hand. If someone is violated, whether man, woman, or trans, we are all responsible to speak out and take a stand.
Know your rights and resources. We care about you as Wild Kids. Take care of yourself and others, and we will help take care of you.
It is always safe for you to report or help someone report in a respectful and private way. If you or someone you know has experienced inappropriate touch, sexual assault, or sexual harassment, you may wish to seek help through the Dean in H109 and ETHS mental health providers. There are social workers in East 123, psychologists in South 121, or counselors in East 125. If the incident occurred at ETHS, an ETHS event, or outside of ETHS, you can expect to receive community resources, including a referral to the Evanston Police Department, help in figuring out how to share this with your parent or guardian, and mental health services at ETHS.
Additionally, if the incident occurred at ETHS or at an ETHS event, you can expect the following. The Dean and an ETHS mental health provider will meet with you to understand what occurred. Deans will then complete an investigation, take actions per the pilot, and follow up to share that the investigation has been completed. All privacy of student records will be maintained. This means ETHS cannot legally share information about other students, including consequences.
For more information, check out the resources below.
Do you know who we are?
We are.
We are.
We are.
We are black.
We are white.
We are Latinos. We are Asian. We are South Asian and Middle Eastern.
We are female.
We are male.
We are all genders and gender nonconforming.
All sexual orientations.
We are athletes.
We are poets.
We are musicians. We are teachers.
We are leaders.
We are allies.
All religions and faiths. We are diverse learners.
We are disabled persons.
Do you know why it's a great day?
So we thought that it was worthwhile that you see the entire 5-minute video that students and staff really worked hard on together, and appreciate your support. So in closing, we really want to say thank you. Thank you for supporting the work of Student Services and the work of all of ETHS. We also want to say thank you for joining us in the commitment to the Dalai Lama quote, which is, "It is not enough to be compassionate. You must act." We're committed to being united with each other and our students, and know that together we will indeed go farther. Thank you.
Thank you. Really like that video. That was awesome. Okay, questions from the board? Jude?
Yes. Thanks for that very comprehensive and encouraging report. I did see a statistic that to me is staggering, and you did address it and speak to it, but I would just like, if you can, to elaborate a little bit about your findings thus far. But 2% of the students being written up, 43% of the write-ups or the infractions are from 2% of the student population. That is staggering. And I wonder if you've gotten to the point where you've disaggregated that data. I mean, I can guess what the breakdown is going to be. And I wonder if there's a trend. Are these infractions being written up by, is there a trend of the teachers that are writing these up? Because we know there are certain students. There are a certain group of students that are going to be repeat, that are going to continue to be written up for certain infractions. But I wonder, like, how granular have you all gotten in this? Because this is not a surprising trend, but I know that we're being laser focused, for example, with it being the Year of African American Male and certain initiatives that you all are doing to change the culture around discipline. So can you speak to that a little bit?
Absolutely.
Anything that you found
Yes.
thus far?
Yes, so we have seen, and looking at this year, and I don't have the number right in front of me, but yes, the majority of those students, specifically 75 students, are Black males. And one of the things that we have talked a lot about as a team is how are we supporting the students, for all years, including our focus on Black males. And one of the things that I am continuously impressed by is the response to supporting the students. And that doesn't get at the prevention, but the response to the need is significant. And like never before, I see the deans and the social workers and the counselors and the psychologists really working so closely. I mean, I was just in a dean's office today about a Title IX situation. The dean and the social worker had already collaborated. We're making a plan. I'm like, great, y'all don't need me. This is fabulous. Just because they're working so closely together, and that's the positive response and the relationship development. So I want to, and I say that in part because that's a response, but the relationship development is actually a prevention as well. Because we've seen more students coming into the dean's office prior to getting to the point of referral, which is one of our goals, right, from a preventative perspective. So those are two of the components that we want to continue to look at. And as a team, I'm going to let Dr. Campbell speak a little bit to some of the messaging with staff, as well as thinking about one of the elements that we look at even as supervisors is what's happening within the departments. Where are the needs? How do we support staff? How do we do all these, not just support students, but how do we support staff in these efforts?
Yeah, and thank you for your question. I'll start off by saying we have a lot of students who are in pain, right? And it's pain when I listen to their stories, given like some of the larger systemic societal things that are happening, particularly within communities of color around trauma and some other things. They're in pain. And when some of these kids begin to externalize, of course, there's a referral written. But that doesn't necessarily mean that the kid is in trouble. What it means is something has occurred, and either the dean, counselor, social worker, psychologist, case manager, whoever that might be, we're going to get involved in a different kind of way. We met as a team we were getting down to some granular things about attendance and tardies and things of that nature. And we began to share some names of some students. And I was not shocked, but I was definitely pleasantly affirmed that all of the folks around the table, from student services to our dean's office, we were intervening, but we were also trying to take some preventative measures for all of our kids who are just having a really tough time and are asking for help in so many different ways. So that's the frame, and that's the frame we talk about with our staff. We don't talk about the kids being something wrong with them or they have all these problems. We want to make sure that we're asset focused, and I think I've shared that with you before in our Year of the Black Male report. But we also want to acknowledge that they're hurting. And when we acknowledge it and we talk about it that way, our response is more of support than consequence.
I just have a follow-up with that, and it's kind of a reflection as a black father. I have 3 sons. Because I think the presumption oftentimes is, like you said, and I'm glad you said, we're not saying that we're being more supportive than saying there's something wrong, and what types of interventions can we make to be more responsive. However, oftentimes it's presumed that something is wrong with the student. What are we doing to support the staff in terms of changing practices, building better relationships? What are we doing to support the staff? Because as a black father, I know that oftentimes these discipline situations and the outcomes of them have to do with poor relationships, teacher-student relationships, or lack thereof, maybe no relationship at all. And again, I'm going to go back to this. Being the father of 3 sons, I know how I raised them, and I know how they've been done a disservice at times. And as an educator, I can be responsive knowing how the system works, where some parents cannot advocate for their children. So I think it's more of a reflection from a lived experience now that I'm a parent, and just to make sure that we're also focusing on supporting teachers who need that help as well, because they may not be building good relationships and their expectations may not be the same, or they may see, there's no equity there with how they dish out the discipline or how they perceive certain behavior depending on who the student is.
Yeah. Right. As a matter of fact, just last Monday, we had last week? We had a robust conversation with staff in multiple workshops around that very question and around that very issue. And that is through our MTSS framework, really speaking with staff on relationships and our restorative practices, and having another conversation with the staff about the Year of the Black Male, because we're trying to give professional development around personalization and support, and understanding their own bias and interpreting behavior and things of that nature. That's a lot to consider for staff, but that is our ongoing training. It's not what we just say, it's what we keep saying. Yeah.
I would just add that we've been focused in addition to consult, because we have some systems in place, right, for staff to get feedback, to look at things from a racial lens, right, to do these different elements, but we also ask for staff to reach out. And I did joke a little bit with Dr. Campbell of, wow, why did we really emphasize this so much? Because we're very busy with the consult, but it's so meaningful. And to be able to support staff who are willing to think through, okay, this is what I did in this moment, and I'm really thinking back to, I wish I would have done it differently. What next, right? And staff are really taking opportunities to do that.
Awesome. Thank you.
Question.
Monique?
You spoke of interventions and preventions. Can you be a little bit more specific? Like, what does that look like? What's an intervention? I think just to give the community a sense of how deep you go.
Sure.
You know, and it's one of the statistics about the homelessness that we deal with our students. And I'm often, you know, hearing or receiving calls about placing youth that are disconnected from families and no one else is responding to inside a safe environment so that they can still maintain schooling. And so that's extremely challenging because we don't have that in Evanston. That doesn't exist. So I think it's important, that's a separate issue, but I know that's a big issue when it relates to some of the interventions you're really trying to seek out. So if you can be a little bit more descriptive about what that looks like. So our community, I'm always talking about the community needs to hear this, you know, resolutions and solutions don't exist solely inside this building. It is a collaborative effort beyond the professionals that see our children every day. So just to restate what that looks like, hopefully that we can get some support to help our kids be better.
Absolutely. Well, we appreciate your emphasis on the community because ETHS does so many things. Sometimes we feel like we need to continue to do it all, but the amazing part of this is that our community partners are supporting us every day with students, and sometimes multiple agencies are coming together to address student needs. So when we think about intervention and all of the different pieces, so that includes case management around McKinney-Vento, around sexual assault, around psychiatric needs, of which sometimes the student has experienced all of those things. Our number of students who are the unaccompanied homeless youth, right, that you're referencing, where they are disconnected from family members and have used the support of so many different people in their friend network and then have exhausted that as well. We have a young man who is just graduating graduating early, who is an unaccompanied homeless youth. And just as an example, we had worked with Connections for the Homeless. We had worked internally with the student's counselor, with the social worker, had been working intensively, reaching out to all of the various folks. And that included using our resources here at school to be able to help get deodorant, to be able to get clothing, to be able to get some of those bare necessities, and then helping the student with post-high school planning because he got into UIC as a male of color, and we'll be starting there in the fall. So all of those efforts are very much appreciated from the community partnering perspective, and it's time-consuming, and it's all worth it, right? So that some of that is that case management. That means bringing everyone together. Some of it is the crisis intervention. Some of it is leaving ETHS and having to go to the emergency room because of psychiatric needs of a student who's not being able to be safe for themselves and is at risk of suicide. So we look at, these are our daily, right, constant crises to be able to address from an intervention perspective. And I would also like to note that as we talk about the discipline referrals, that in the past we kind of saw those two things as separate. As you said, Dr. Campbell, our students are hurting and they're showing it in all different kinds of ways, but sometimes they actually have very similar levels of symptomology. It's just showing up in different ways. And so that's important to us. Just because a student is acting out and another student is internalized, and doesn't mean that they're both not depressed and need significant support, or had different trauma that needs support. So that's a little bit about intervention, if that helps. And then from a prevention perspective, within our PE and wellness curriculum, at all grade levels, we have the wellness focus, specifically around bullying. So from a preventative perspective, addressing it with all students across grade levels, about bullying, about harassment, about sexual assault, about depression, about anxiety, and a big piece of that prevention is about teaching kids that if something happens to you, please speak up. If you're experiencing something or someone else is, speak up, right? Come and access resources. Tell us what you need so we can support you. So a big focus around prevention is accessing resources and removing all the barriers that there are for students that way. And then some of the prevention has to do with the emphasis school-wide to how do we engage with students in the hallway. Am I walking down the hallway while I'm on my phone, or am I greeting students? And some of them I know by name and greeting them by name, right? And that goes from all the way from our custodial and safety staff who I see engaging with students and creating that sense of belonging from a prevention perspective into the classroom as well. So kind of running the gamut.
Jonathan?
I love that video. I was just, my first question is, how have you circulated that video? How are students seeing it?
So there are a couple different ways. We started this with our, and then as a Title IX coordinator, I was a part of this. Students really were talking about how do we shift the culture of consent? Because it's not enough to talk about accessing resources if something has happened to you. Right? We want to do the prevention. We want to shift the culture. So in preparing for April as Sexual Assault Awareness Month, we decided that a video that is assets-based, strengths-based perspective about who we are and how we can be part of the solution. The students really came up with the hashtags. They developed all these with guidance from all of us. But they did a phenomenal job. And in terms of circulation, with Dr. Campbell and Dr. Witherspoon's approval, we actually played it first at the pep rally.
Which fell during a Sexual Assault Awareness Week.
Which was during Sexual Assault Awareness Week, and the build-up. And actually, there were several components. And initially, when we were having conversation about pep rally, there was the conversation of, what? We can't do that. And as we talked about how we integrate all these things about who we are, we agreed that we can do it in a way that means we're all taking ownership for this, and we can celebrate that ownership. And that can be part of our pep rally, not just recognition of like achievement in a sport or a different activity. And so it was actually shown in the gym during the pep rally. It had got lots of cheers at the end.
It was quiet. It was quiet.
It was quiet during the whole video. That's a lot in the gym for it to be quiet during the whole time.
And they cheered when their friends came on the screen.
Absolutely, nice. Absolutely. And then what we did was, as we wrapped up Sexual Assault Awareness Week and Month, we played it during third period, as it was only 5 minutes. Instead of announcements, we played it during third period in every single classroom, as well as spaces where students didn't have class assigned.
That's great.
Yep. And now it's in our Building Healthy Relationships PE curriculum for juniors and seniors.
That's great.
Yeah.
I have two other questions. One is, the numbers on social work referrals. So there were 419 social work referrals in 2018 versus 142 in 2015. So that's like 3 times as many. And this is the question, I feel like a broken record. Every year I ask you this. We don't have 3 times as many social workers as we had in 2015. If we have that much greater demand for service, you need to come to us say we need, there need to be more resources there. So that, that
Thank you.
That concerns
I'm here. I'm asking.
Okay. Because we have to meet the need, and obviously the need is great, and it's great, but people must be really being stretched thin with those kinds of numbers.
You are correct, and I think we talk a lot about if we're going to sustain our students, how are we going to sustain ourselves for the marathon that is the entire school year and the intensity of the marathon. So I appreciate that very much because that is very much our truth.
The last thing I wanted to ask you about is the the percentage of students with no referrals, there was not one number that really frankly disturbed me, which was, because it stuck out so much from all of the others, which was the students on IEPs. That 55% of students on IEPs had no referrals. That means that almost half of the students on IEPs did have referrals. And that's not true for any of the other subgroup. And I'm wondering if part of that might be, have to do with staff training in this sense. It may be that some students are on IEPs. Obviously, students are on IEPs for a variety of different reasons. But to the extent that they're on IEPs for social, emotional issues, or even intellectual disabilities, there may be behaviors by those students that need to be properly interpreted by staff that might otherwise be seen as disruption. And I wonder, it just occurred to me that might account for, in part, for that disproportion with the other populations. Do you have any thoughts on that?
So my initial thought is yes, because I was looking at the same thing, and as a former special education social worker, it's near and dear to my heart. So I think we see a variety of things, and one of them is that our special education staff are very dedicated to continuing to help shape behavior. That means a lot of coaching, that means feedback, that means in some classrooms there's going to be more of a point system. And in addition to that, as part of that process, we do need to document, as you said, right, appropriate behavior, and when there is a misstep, we do need to provide that as consistency for, as we do with all students. That doesn't mean that there's going to be a punitive action, and that is our shift.
No. What
right?
I was suggesting, I'm guessing that the special education staff are attuned to. I'm talking about the staff that the students on IEPs deal with, who are not special education staff, who may need more in the way of training on properly assessing this kind of a situation.
Your question is a really good one to differentiate. For students who have IEPs, are the referrals coming more from teachers in the general education setting versus the special education setting?
Yeah.
Correct? And I don't have that data readily available. My experience, having been a dean, is that many actually come from special education, but again, not from a punitive perspective, but from okay, we've coached you, we've worked on this, we now need to formalize this, and you need to have a conversation with the dean, have that restorative opportunity. We've done this in the classroom setting, we want to formalize it. And not, again, shifting it from the negative and the punitive to figuring out how do we document it, how do we make sure supports are in place, and how do we move things forward. But it's a great question, thank you.
Great. Pat?
So my question related to what Jonathan just said, I think that maybe you can talk a little bit more about what the wellness focus of the whole staff, because clearly, if you need more social workers, I'm all for it, and I'm behind you on that. But I also think that everybody has to be thinking, maybe they can't quite be as deep thinking as you are on it, because you think this all the time, but what is going on with coaches and with regular education, math teachers, and security, and just all the different people that kids are going to encounter, because I feel like their level of knowledge and understanding is really going to help you, all of you, and most importantly, the kids. And from everything, from the tier 1 stuff where kids just, trying to keep it together to play a sport and keep their grades decent and get their homework done and go to bed somewhere before 2 in the morning. You know what I mean? Like everything from that all the way through to the really serious trauma that you all have talked about. So can you give us some more specifics on that?
So I will start out by recognizing, I think one area that we're continuing to look at is how do we support our staff because of the experience almost of vicarious trauma. Because it's not just the social workers or the psychologists or the counselors who are talking with the students about their experiences and how they're stretched. And we recognize that teachers and coaches and all these folks are having similar experiences because students are sharing a lot of their lives with them. And so we need to continue to figure out how do we support staff in that way, whether it's around, the bullying and harassment PD that we did this fall to the MTSS PD that we did recently that was centered around a variety of breakouts around race and equity, but also around restorative frameworks of how do we help students engage in that and how do we engage in it with our students when we get to that point where we make a misstep, because we're a bit stretched. So we are continuing to look at what are the ways we can address that, and I think the other component is looking at wellness, like Dr. Campbell said, naming it for the year. There are a few ways we did that. I mean, this is a subtle way. I'll let you speak to HR because we don't want to steal Toya Campbell's thunder on this. But for our raffle at the end of our PD last Monday is we raffled off, in the name of well-being, what raffle would you like to, just as a breath. We'd never done a raffle that way after a PD that everybody's required to go to and you have to sign in and you have to scan in. And so we gave people the opportunity. Would you like to go to a wellness chiropractic acupuncture opportunity? Would you like to go to a health food store? Would you like to go to a workout place? I'm trying to not name the particular locations. And so that was met with such positivity. We drew 6 names throughout the breakouts, and everyone said, what's that? I said sorry. Oh, that's all good. Dr. Campbell gave some extra ones in his, that's why he just said sorry in his breakout. And all the staff said, I never win anything. Thank you so much. And they even took the time to send additional emails to me just to say, thank you, this is so great. And so those little moments where we try to lift from the PD opportunities as well as little acts of kindness that way. Did you want to talk about HR?
Well,
and
a
all the
different
others?
thing. Well, from a Tier 1 perspective, just naming wellness and talking about well-being was huge for the staff. There were several faculty members and staff members who came to me with tears in their eyes saying, thank you for permission to either grieve, to acknowledge if I'm overwhelmed, to acknowledge what is happening with my personal self, and being able to just be having that acknowledged in the workplace was really huge. I would also say that we have been engaging some of this over the past several years. Every break we have, Dr. Bavis sends out a homework break where we really are trying to encourage staff and students to take real breaks, no homework, no papers, no studying, really just take a rest. Another thing that we've done with the calendar is to have exams before break for next year so that students and staff can actually take some real time off. So every way, and even with culture and climate, there are a lot of things that we have been trying to acknowledge and to engage so that folks can take a breath. Today we had our orchestra and our choir do a few selections from the holiday concert from yesterday during PD today, just so that people can come. If they weren't grading, if they weren't calling home, if they just needed to come and support students and hear some great holiday music, that's what they did today. We have also had our, various student performing groups to perform in the H Hall every morning at 8 o'clock. We're serving hot chocolate. We're just trying, this is Tier 1 stuff, right, with prevention. Community building, just to acknowledge we know it's hard. Everybody, we're going to get through this and try to have some fun while you're at work and while you're trying to go to school.
Thank you, that's awesome.
Yeah, that's great. Gretchen.
I'm going to make more of a plug or a comment than have a question. I think this is great information. Thanks very much. The plug I'm going to make is for EdRed. Everybody knows that I'm the chair of the executive board for EdRed, which is our regional school advocacy organization. And we have an annual dinner every January towards the end of the month. And the topic for that dinner this year is mental health and well-being. And I know that we always have a good contingent of school board members, so I would encourage all our board members. I think Lisa sent out the email today to get your sign in, get yourself signed up through Lisa. And staff, of course, is also welcome, staff administrators. I think Pete and Marcus often come to these events. Taya, I'm sure you would love to this year.
Thank you.
But it would be great to have a good contingent. There'll be a panel. I think we're still working on people to be on the panel, but it'll include legislators. And there's always a chance before the dinner to mingle and talk about the good work that we're doing, how that can be a model for other districts. It's a good time to, interact with other districts and share ideas as well as listening to the panel. So I'm going to make that plug. I have one sort of broad comment that I'm not sure you can answer directly. I'm really curious whenever we get a report for how the data that is presented in the report in these sort of isolated snapshots, grades, attendance, discipline referrals, what the intersection and overlap of those categories of reporting are. So in other words, I would really like to know for the 2% that Jude was referring to earlier that get 43% of the referrals, if we look at that, which of those students are participating in extracurricular activities, which of those students have attendance, and I think we can guess and predict that maybe they're not participating in extracurriculars, that perhaps they don't have strong attendance records, blah, blah, blah. But I don't know that, and there may be some surprises that are revealed when we take a closer look, because those things don't always line up in the way we might want to think that they line up. And, that goes to this idea of painting the deficit mindset, for example. I don't want to presume that those students who are struggling the most with the referrals are of a particular color, or that, they're not involved somehow. There may be maybe those are the students, for example, who are getting the most social work referrals, and that, is consistent with this notion that these are students who really are burdened with a lot of stuff. So can you talk about that overlap a little bit and how we can better see that?
Be happy to, yeah. I mean, it's such a complicated narrative because a lot of these students come to school every single day. If they've been in a hospital or have had some sort of challenge here in school, they keep coming back. And it's one of the things that we are studying ourselves, right? To really see, what are they overlapping? What are the trends with tardies? What are the trends with attendance? What is the recidivism in the dean's office? All of these kinds of things. And what we have found is that there isn't a single narrative, but there are some, common patterns. But each and every one of those kids has an individual story that is very complex and layered. And we do try to work with each other. We try to work with our community agencies to really problem solve around a lot of the complications. And we realize that our approach to a lot of these students, it has to be adaptive, right? We need adaptive solutions. These aren't technical things, let's just put a program. It's really not that. It really takes a lot of thinking. It takes us challenging some of our own procedures around how we're engaging students with regard to, okay, if this intervention and that intervention hasn't worked, okay, what's the next step? What haven't we thought of? If we're holding on to our babies, right? Yeah. What haven't we thought of that we need to do? And that's the conversations that we're having every single day. So we've looked at a granular level, and we continue to look at that. And there isn't a single narrative. It is very complex and very difficult, but we are doing our best.
Phoebe.
I want to go back really quickly to when you talked about prevention and what that looks like at a student level. So I've been through wellness. I was a sophomore. And as a junior and senior leader, I've kind of seen a very unique and specific lens of the Building Healthy Relationships unit. I think that like as a junior leader, I was surrounded by people who like were interested in the topic of like domestic violence and building a healthy relationship. But then as a senior leader, I wasn't in like a class that I was like recognized because I'm normally with freshmen and they don't take the building healthy relationships unit. And that was a lot more disconnected. Like the people in the class weren't as engaging as I had seen my junior year. And as a senior leader, again, I saw what the freshmen, what their education about like wellness and consent and just like having a healthy relationship is, and that also was not, it didn't meet what I would have wanted to see, if that makes sense. So one very specific question that I have is, has wellness ever been considered to be a full year, just to kind of like completely like touch on everything that needs to be touched on in like a very comprehensive way, if that makes any sense. So that's a very specific question, but I was just wondering.
Yeah, we're all looking at each other. So I will say, I'm not familiar with the year-long component.
Okay.
It's a good point, but I will say that part of the conversation we have been having is, when do we have wellness?
Okay.
To get at what you're discussing.
Yeah.
So we have a new department chair for PE and wellness who's really who has always been a part of these prevention committees. So we're very excited that she has helped, and she was a part of our sexual assault awareness committee, moving this forward in a different way and creating, and you were speaking to this, Phoebe, making sure that across grade levels, we're really sending a similar strong message, and that's taking some time, right? And we recognize that takes time, and we have a sense of urgency that is about this, but we also are making these shifts. One of the conversations we have had is, at what point do we have wellness? At what point do we expand kind of the wellness curriculum within PE earlier? What does that look like? We do a lot of freshman front-loading with Calvin Terrell, with Clothesline Project, with a lot of these early, right, addressing of pieces. And so it's a great point, because it's one that we're grappling with too. What is too much and what's the balance for students? So, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll share that feedback.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's all. Thank you.
Other questions?
I have one, quick one. You keep mentioning PE. I'm wondering how much of this is also being discussed within our sports environment, our sporting environments.
Thank you. That's a great question.
And with our coaches and.
So that's been an ongoing question, and last school year, actually, our athletic director joined our sexual assault awareness committee planning for staff and students. So Chris Livatino was a part of it. Even not being I'm a morning person, not being a morning person and joining us at 7:30 meetings, joining students and staff together. And so that was critical in putting the weight and the emphasis on, this is about all of our students, and not focusing solely on athletics or a different group, but Chris really brought that focus within all of his coaches, and that came from the spring participation of sexual assault awareness, many different workshops that we offered, and encouraging their coaches to encourage their students, even though they were off season. It didn't just have to be about the spring, really encouraging that engagement, that connection, a recognition of students who had made that effort to attend those workshops and communicating those names, but also sending that culture shift and the expectation that we have the conversations with students. So that was different. The other component was we had some special trainings, specifically because a lot of these spaces are PE for catching all students, grades 9 through 12. But we also, so we did professional development specifically with PE as well as with coaches.
So this is really important. This is our second goal. Student well-being is, as we know, one of the most important areas that we want to focus on. And we also know that in order for students to be cared for, we have to care for our staff. So I really appreciate your report and listening and responding so well to all these really great questions. Board, I think you did a really good job really digging in and asking some very good questions. And we will continue to emphasize this goal and monitor our students. And, you know, I too had that big concern about the number of students referred for social work and just how that jumped. I often think about that. I know our society is getting more complicated, and the challenges students have just seem to increase. Yeah. So I worry about that. I think about that. I worry about that. I wonder what that's doing to students and what that's doing to staff. So this really has to continue to be at the forefront for all of us. Thank you. I really appreciate the work, the hard work you and your team. Obviously, you're doing some amazing hard work. So thank you for that heavy lifting. And please let everyone know that the board really appreciates you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
You want that? It's going to be short and sweet.
Ms. Savage-Williams, I'm going to suggest, because Taya and Marcus are scheduled to also do the alternative school report, but they've been up there for an hour and 15 minutes.
Is that right?
Yes. So I'm going to suggest that you skip to and do the report on Oakland Community College.
Okay.
Give them a break, and then they can return to do that alternative school
Okay, that's fine.
report.
That's good.
And our next one is shorter. Oh, not Oakton and Dale, by the way, just the all school.
And we have coming forward Ann Brennan, who is Assistant Vice President for Academic Affairs and College Transitions at Oakton Community College. She is joined by Dr. Bavis and Dale Liebforth, who is the chair of our mathematics department. And so welcome all.
Welcome.
Okay. Hello, everyone. I'm Ann Brennan. I appreciate the opportunity to talk with you this evening about the partnerships that go on between Oakton Community College and Evanston Township High School. I've been at Oakton since May of 2018. I am charged with all issues of credit and people that come into Oakton and credit and people that exit and transition to another place. Tonight I'm going to talk to you a little bit about Oakton. I'm going to talk a little bit about dual credit, about our enrollments, both at Oakton and in dual credit, some of our programming, and I'll be glad to take questions. I can do it as we go along. I don't know, I saw that presentation. It seems though you let the presentation happen and then you ask questions, but I'm glad to take questions at any point. So this is the clicker, and this is perhaps it. There. So first I thought it might be helpful to give you some context about enrollment in colleges. You've read about it and you've heard about it. But one of the statistics that you might not have heard is that the proportion of students who are choosing community college as they leave high school is growing. So between 2013 and 2016, we saw it go from 28% to over 31% of students who are choosing college are choosing the sector of community colleges as they go there. This is from ICCB, so this is definitely happening as a 3-year trend. These things are always a year behind, and this seems to be 2 years at this point. But what we're seeing again is a shift in the sector that they're choosing. And I'm going to give you another statistic. And that statistic is saying that there's this inverse relationship between employment and attendance at community colleges. So we see less and less unemployment, more full employment, and that has that effect on community colleges, so that we have a more recent statistic, and we see that our enrollment dropped by about 10,000 students in the state of Illinois, and we went down to 282,000 across the state. or a 3.8% drop. Oh, I keep pushing the wrong button. And Oakton's enrollment is following the same pattern, so that we saw ourselves have a 4.9% drop in students and a smaller, but again, a drop in credit hours that our students are taking. We are seeing students take a larger proportion of or a larger number of credit hours each semester. And when we look at the Evanston residents who are in our population, in fall, we have 691 students at Oakton who are residents of Evanston, and 79 new ETHS graduates from 2018 are enrolled as first-time in college freshmen with us. So that, by coincidence, 8% of our enrollment is our Evanston residents, and 8% of your graduating class is enrolling at Evanston. They just happen to both be 8%. I thought I'd give you a look at where students at Oakton are enrolling. We have two main campuses, one in Des Plaines, one in Skokie, and you can see that about 50% of our students are enrolled at one of those campuses or both of those campuses, and that we have not seen it. If you look along the numbers from 2014 to 2018, you can see the decline in enrollments. However, if you look at our growth areas, it's in students who take online courses, either online with a course at one of our campuses or purely online. I wanted to remind everyone that in the state of Illinois and at Oakton Community College, everyone now accepts AP credit. We also accept IB credit, and I don't believe that's happening in our district, but it is a form of education that is expanding in the state of Illinois. And if you come to Oakton with AP credit of a 3 or higher, or IB credit with a 4 or higher, or with the high school award of the state seal of biliteracy, you will get credit for that college credit that you earned while you're at Evanston High School or any other high school. We are a member of the Illinois Articulation Initiative. That is a consortium of over 100 colleges, and in that relationship, we have a general education core curriculum that is built into our Associate of Arts degree, that is built into our Associate of Science degree. Any student who comes to Oakton and pursues those two transfer degrees will have fulfilled the general education core curriculum, which means that it will transfer to any of the member colleges, so there's no worrying about taking the courses about whether they will transfer. They do transfer. It all transfers. It's built in. That, of course, are our transfer degrees. And I thought I'd tell you a little bit about our reputation. It continues to be strong. If you look on mycreditstransfer.org, which is where you'll find the tool that transfer students use, Transferology, you will find that we are the 5th largest supplier of transfer students of all community colleges in the state of Illinois. That would put us ahead of larger colleges in terms of the number of students who we have sent to four-year colleges. That's a long-time trend at Oakton. We were ranked 50th nationally in a 2019 ranking of the best value community colleges in the United States by valuecolleges.com. That's based on the quality of our education, the return on investment that our students have when they graduate, and factors of cost and how that cost compares with education that you can get elsewhere. We are ranked number 1 in Illinois and number 17 in the United States for our education of adult learners. That's by Washington Monthly. This is ranked on ease of transfer, flexibility of programs, services for adult students, the mean earning power of students 10 years after graduation, among other criteria. And we are a place that has for a long time been, and I'm playing catch up with this, we have been in long-time admission partnerships. I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about those. We are very involved right now in the development of curricular pathways and we are very keyed into student persistence and completion as a sign of student success. We are going to be aligning those curricular pathways with our high school partners. We are involved in that right now. I expect us to be doing that over the next few years to make sure that exactly what is being prepared for in high school takes you smoothly on into Oakton. We are working right now with all the high schools in our district, including Evanston, on the redesign of a transitional math course so that students are not taking remedial math. That is part of the statewide initiative to create transitional math as part of the PWR Act, and we are involved with Evanston in that conversation right now. We have a mandatory new student orientation apparently at Oakton, and again, I've only been there since May, but this was not mandatory in the past. It is now, and it is about keeping students, getting them prepared, connecting them after they come to us from wherever they come to us from. And we're in the second year of a widely known project that is engaging students and helping persistence, that we call the Persistence Project. If you Google it in higher education, inside higher education, you'll see the really nice write-up that it got last spring. Faculty are spending 15 minutes with each student. This is a voluntary program by our faculty in the first 3 weeks of classes, and we are finding that it makes students stay in college. I said I would talk a little bit more about our university partners and partnerships. We have 10 guaranteed admission programs already signed. We also have dual enrollment programs. And let me tell you the difference. A guaranteed admission program, the university comes to the college and says, if your students do these various things, we guarantee them admission under these circumstances. I can talk to you about a couple of those. DePaul has been for a long time guaranteeing students admission if they join the DePaul Admission Partnership Program, the DAP program. The University of Illinois at Chicago, those being two large public and private institutions, have been again saying if you join our guaranteed admission program, then we will give you advising every semester that you're at Oakton. We will tell you the courses that you need to take in order to transfer. We will give you orientations and invitations to our campus events. And when you come, you will seamlessly move into our college. In addition, DePaul is giving now extra money to students who join the partnership as further incentive. The dual enrollment programs go a step further in that they encourage students, and we have a dual enrollment program with Lake Forest, with Roosevelt, and with Elmhurst College, which we just joined into last year, and they are offering students the chance to sign up for courses while they're at Oakton prices at the partner institution. This gives them a real sense of what it's like to be at that school. The Lake Forest partnership is particularly concentrating on the summer semester when they can come and do an intensive summer at Lake Forest, and again, at a greatly reduced price. And these partnerships really do save students a great deal of money as they pursue a fairly expensive education. The transfer paths partnerships that we have with multiple colleges are really things that people have often called 2+2s, but I've been doing this stuff for a really long time. And the reason I don't like that term is it is not normal that students take 2 years to get through a community college. It's unusual. We have a wide population. Our students come from many, many backgrounds, and we don't think it's a terrible problem if they're going part-time. It's often why they came to Oakton instead of choosing a four-year college, because their lives needed this kind of a program, a part-time program that was in their community. So I like to call these transfer paths. They both do the same thing. What do you need to take here, followed by what do you need to take there, and make sure that I don't choose anything wrong, so that when I get there, people don't tell me that it's going to take me another half year to get through this program. Then I have money to pay for. We do a lot of transfer programming. This kind of gives you a continuum through the year of the 60-plus transfer basic workshops that went on this year. Each one of those circles represents a type of fair that we put on this year. The new fairs that we added were really marketed at different groups. We had a Latinx fair, an HBCU and MSI fair, and UIC Day particular fair, like a specialization fair for just UIC, as 3 examples of new fairs. But every week and every day, colleges are at Oakton recruiting students. It is well known that transfer students have higher graduation rates than freshmen at college. So if you have concerns that your students would leave Evanston and go to a community college, go to Oakton, and that they would not graduate, if they go on to transfer, they have a much higher chance of graduating than people who started at many of those four-year colleges of graduating. There's a lot of reasons behind that. But you can see in the corner the top 5 destinations for Oakton students for many, many years. You'll always find NEIU, DePaul, UIC, Loyola, and UIUC among the top 5 to 7 transfer destinations of the students from Oakton. And this slide talks a little bit about the new programming and curriculum that we are looking at. We are meeting right now with our new Dean of Business and Associate Vice President of Workforce Development. Starts in January. His first job will be to work with his business faculty and our corporate advising boards to update our business curriculum. We are looking into a computer applications for business program. Our computer information systems program is developing. Our early childhood education program has just been redeveloped. We had a meeting just this week with National Louis to update the transfer path to National Louis. We expect in February to have an education event where we'll have 6 different pathways. The path to becoming a teacher in the state of Illinois has been really difficult in the past 5 years. It is really hard for anyone to figure out how to become a teacher. I know why there's a predicted shortage of 5,000 early childhood teachers in Illinois, because it was really hard to figure out how to train to be one if you were a student going through the process in the last 5 years. That seems to have settled down. We have transfer paths from Oakton that will help our students choose the right courses, and a very concerned community out there that are looking for trained teachers in Illinois. A fire science and emergency medical technician, the AAS program is being combined into that new title. When I talk about dual credit, I'll talk a little bit about that growing here in Evanston. And our health careers programs, we see bringing on the new program, the cancer tumor registrar credential, and we'll be the 2nd program nationally to offer that program. This is a chart with a lot of numbers on it, and I'm going to give you a few minutes to see if you can see it. It looks at the new students enrolling from the high schools in our district from 2015 through this fall, 2018. And the very top row is Evanston. And so let me give you a couple of highlights about Evanston. You have been pretty consistent in this chart. So again, this statistic is showing you the size of your graduating classes, and then what percentage of that graduating class moves to Oakton as a freshman that next year. And you have been pretty consistently at about 8 or 9%, this year at about 10%. And again, coincidentally, when you look at how many people from Evanston are in Oakton, about 8% of our population. And that happens, is that a coincidence, or is that what happens with statistics as you get older? But we do have high schools where we have a larger yield from their senior class. There is a perception, and again, I'm learning a lot about Oakton, and I'm learning about this district, that this could change in Evanston, that we in fact could see more students choose Oakton through working with you in partnership. So we're doing that, and I'll talk a little bit about why Evanston is mentioned in Oakton's Strategic Enrollment Management Plan. We want to make sure that if students should be at Oakton, that we're doing what we can to bring them here and to talk to them about the opportunities that they have at Oakton. So starting in November of 2018, a representative began meeting with ETHS students every other Monday. And we're here to talk about going to college in general, because although it's great if students come on to Oakton, because we can help them get to wherever they want to go to, it's great if they just go to college, and that's the attitude of the person who is sitting at the table with them. But we want to make sure that if they do go to Oakton, that they understand the opportunities that are there, and particularly about our partnerships with four-year colleges, so that they can deliberately plan to get to where they want to go if they want to transfer, and also to learn more about the other opportunities that are at Oakton beyond transfer. We have many opportunities for credentials that can lead to jobs. This year we sent out a new Oakton Outlook magazine, and it was mailed to people in the district. Did anybody here get that Oakton Outlook magazine in your mailboxes from the district? I'm always asking these days, so it was in your, and so you see that we're trying to get out there, and our message was about dual credit. That was the highlight of our message, and we were talking to them about us being in your high schools, so that if they're interested in college and they've never thought about it before, we're encouraging them to give it a try while they're in high school. This February, we'll be hosting a high school programming competition, and Evanston will be invited to join as another way of finding out what's going on at Oakton. Connect with us. Now let's look at your picture in dual enrollment. This is all of our dual enrollments from fall 2015 through fall 2018, spring 2015 through spring 2018. And you can see that as dual enrollment has been around, I'm looking at the old records at Oakton, and dual enrollment has been out there in our district for more than 10 years. So this is not a new program. However, the interest in it and the growth in it is big, and I want to give you some reasons that this happened like this. Oakton, number one, has committed to increasing the size of our dual enrollment program and working with you, our partners, to deliver this, because there's a lot of research that makes us believe that getting dual enrollment exposure while you're in high school will, particularly for underrepresented populations and first-generation students, give them a picture of college that they've not had before and potentially attend college. It isn't completely self-serving in that there isn't any indication that they will choose Oakton if they do this dual credit. But there is an indication that they will go to college, that they will graduate, and that they will, from high school, and that they will go to college. So we went from having about 1,000 students, or 1,300 enrollments. These are enrollments on the top line for, 750 students in fall 2017. That has moved up to 2,579 students. So what did we do that was so great? Number one, we changed our registration procedures. Last year, you see that 1,300 who enrolled in the spring, they actually were enrolled in the fall, but they weren't enrolled until January. So what we're doing is we're pursuing, we are trying to follow the standards that are set by the National Alliance of Concurrent Partnerships, NACEP. They give accreditation to schools. There's only 2 accredited NACEP schools in the state of Illinois. I sort of have it in my sights to try and get NACEP for Oakton, but whether or not we get it, the Dual Credit Quality Act in the state of Illinois was built on NACEP standards. And it says that we should have a program that really exposes students to college. And that's what I intend to make this program continue to do in really small ways. I started out doing it with what I think of as things students learn in college, like when do you register, when do you drop, when do you pay your bills, how do you get your syllabus, who's your advisor, things that are very, very different than high school. So first we have to start with registration. We registered the year-long, we have courses at the high school level that are taught from September till May, even though at the college level they're taught in one semester. Last year those were registered in the spring. This year we registered them in fall. And we're having the students really look at withdrawing with their teachers in January and February. So we don't want to hurt students who jump in and think they can do college. We want to make sure that there's an escape hatch. But we also want to show them that they are in college and get them registered. Another big reason why this changed and got so much bigger in the fall is that we allowed freshmen and sophomores to enroll in 2 classes, AutoCAD and manufacturing courses. So I looked at how many students at Evanston, and you now have 26 students who are freshmen or sophomores enrolled in dual credit. And the total amount of enrollment is 258. So about 10% of your students are now starting as freshmen or sophomores. What we have in some of the other schools in our district is already we have a breadth of courses in CAD or manufacturing such that we think we're going to be starting to credential students as soon as this year, and certainly within the next 2 years, students will be getting these credentials while they are in high school. And I'm particularly happy about AutoCAD because I'm already beginning to talk with four-year institutions, and my thinking is that I'm not interested particularly in these students becoming AutoCAD professionals. I'm interested in these students getting this skill under their belt and going on further. I'm interested in connecting the credential with the bachelor's degree. And I think that there's a lot of connection with AutoCAD and manufacturing that we haven't really even explored yet. But they're very interested in it, and how do I want them to respond? I want them to give credit. I want them to show that it matters. I want them to show that this kind of study is interesting to them, and it is. So the future collaboration, here's the courses, I'm sorry, that we're teaching at Evanston. And you can see that we're very deep in math, which is, I think, why your math chair is sitting here with me so that he can answer questions for you about math. We are looking at courses that move from preparatory, different levels of preparatory math for college-level math to advanced mathematics, to college-level math and advanced mathematics. But you can see that you have Introduction to Public Safety Careers, and that is an area where we saw an increase at Evanston this year. As I understand it, prior to this year, there were less than 10 students in this section, and this year almost 30. It's, again, a program we're expanding at Oakton, and other high schools are now asking us about teaching this in dual credit because there's a lot of interest in it. And again, it's one of those areas of study that where it prepares you for a job after high school, but it also has transfer capacity. So here are the areas that we are talking about, we are collaborating on in the future. I mentioned transitional math and the business curriculum. We have discussed interest in a barber school. We're very interested in that curriculum as well. If it happens here, we're interested in continuing that credentialing or helping with that credentialing. We are discussing your interest in having our Oakton professors come here or looking at our online courses, and I think that there's a lot of interest for that conversation. I don't know how fast that will move, but we're definitely interested in having that conversation. And then again, the pathways that we are creating, you have pathways on your website, and what we want to make sure is that our pathways and your pathways align. I hope that that was clear, but I'm glad to answer any questions.
Thank you. Thank you for that presentation. Lots of really good courses. Yes, just sitting here amazed. Yes. So questions from the board? Jude.
I just want to say thank you to the district and Oakton for the increased collaboration. You guys are such a great resource, and to increase your footprint here in Evanston, it's a lot of folks have waited for this a long time.
Great.
And thank you for the work that you all are doing to lead this. Appreciate it.
Gretchen.
Thanks very much. It's really great to have you here. You may have heard me said earlier, I'm the chair of the executive board for EdRed, our regional school advocacy organization, and we've spent a lot of time advocating around this dual credit idea, and I'm going to share with the board again, because I think you may have already gotten it from EdRed, an FAQ on sort of where dual credit is going, because there's still lots of these are early days of the new law.
I've seen your FAQ.
And there are a lot of, there's still some questions about the implementation, how that's all going to play out. But the whole idea is excellent. Anything that Oakton can do to help make it work more smoothly, I think is more than welcome. I'm curious about, in addition to the numbers of Evanston students at Oakton, seeming a little low by comparison to some of our neighboring districts, I'm curious about what the path of our students at Oakton has been. In particular, are they grappling with issues that I hear other students are grappling with at community colleges, which is to say they come in maybe needing some remedial assistance, having to repeat courses at Oakton before they can progress beyond sort of those remedial level courses on the front end. How does that look for our ETHS students?
Well, Dr. Bavis was definitely wanting that data from me, and I laid that only.
Oh,
I'm
good,
just
great
trying to
minds.
Get it. So he is pursuing that information on the mathematics side. On the English side, so there's two gateways into college
Sure.
courses, math and English, and last year we began a very formal research project for the multiple measures of placing in English. And we are expecting to get some results from that. So just basically, national research on placement was used to expand our our placement criteria to include grade point average from high school. Again, it's becoming a best practice rather than just with placement exams or GPA. Rather than just with placement exams or SAT, it was to add GPA and to place with GPA, which we did across the district, including students from Evanston, but we won't know until the end of this year our first set of results about how that placement went for that population.
Or how it compares with whatever you were doing
Right.
before.
Yeah, and we have been using multiple measures for mathematics, actually for many years. Dale and I were discussing before the meeting that probably 4 or 5 years ago, the math faculty from Evanston met with the math faculty from Oakton and looked at every course and made a comparison of the syllabi and made recommendations for placement based on course and grades along with tests. What we're talking about doing now is development of transitional math, this statewide course. But in the meantime, these levels of math have very much been about using different levels of readiness and teaching to it so that they're getting ready for the next step. Would that be how you would see what's happening with math here?
So the idea is, in a nutshell, what I'm sort of getting at here is our students previously may have been graduating from ETHS, arriving at Oakton, taking one of these gateway courses,
Yeah.
an entry or a gateway remedial level course, struggling in it, paying for it, failing it, taking it again, or maybe even again, and eventually sort of fading away and just not continuing, and it's not working out for them. So, I'm wondering, is that your understanding that we at least have some students who had that experience?
Yes.
I guess we don't have the numbers.
So
the idea is that we're gonna have an improved experience to avoid that problem.
I actually have from before the 110 course, our Math 110, the Intermediate College Algebra course.
Right.
We had 67% of our students were in developmental math. Math 110 still at
67% of students who attended Oakton.
prior to
This
implementing
new-
the 110
new
course,
scheme.
the transit, right. So 67% of our students who went to Oakton were in developmental math, and 16% were in Math 110, which is the course that we now offer here. Last year, I think it was 80-some%, and now every student who is in the 110 course is placing into credit-bearing math when they get there. So the key is how do we, and I don't have the data for all of the students that attended Oakton, how do we, figure out which students to get into the 110 course to guarantee placement into credit-bearing math, but to go from the numbers we saw before, now the students who are in that class are now transferring to Oakton and placing into credit-bearing math, which sets them on a much better pathway.
So
after
things
that.
are going back, we're moving in the right direction.
Right.
Yeah, and I can't help but think about also I'm starting to play with data that I'm getting some access to, and we get more than 50% of our students who are not coming straight out of high school. They're coming at us at another time, 5 years, 2 years later, 3 years later, 5 years later. So with more than 50% doing that, many of them also are getting their introduction to math somewhere else, possibly, at another community college, at a four-year college. So it isn't a simple line from your high school into our math. It's often through other math challenges that are quite similar. You know, I worked at DePaul for 14 years, and we had many, many students place into need for help with math. And so we offered math in the summer. We offered co-requisite courses to help you get ready in the math course that you qualify for. So this is, though it's pronouncedly different at the community college where we don't have an ACT score that you needed to have as you moved in.
Right. So the next obvious question is, how about English?
You know, more people were placed into college level, less people were there. I think one of the fast results that I saw from our placement scores, which I think we've shared at the district, is that we know people's placement in comparison to the past where people avoided the placement exams, or we didn't know it because we didn't use GPAs.
Right. Well, it seems to me that if you want to see higher enrollment at Oakton, which I have no reason to argue about that happening, except to say that I think demonstrating that you can have success at Oakton will be the key to getting a better enrollment at Oakton. So, hopefully this feeds on itself in that logical way, and our students have more success, recognize Oakton as an option that actually has value and can benefit them.
Yeah, I would agree.
Let me underscore 2 points on this before we move on. One is that nationally, only 34% of the students that are placed into remedial coursework in community colleges ever complete a college degree. So that's a real number, and that was just in the Chronicle of Higher Ed this past week. The other thing I want to, so that's why this is really important to Evanston, it's really important to Oakton, it's really important not just on the national scene, but on the local scene, and that's why we're investing so much time and energy into really getting this right.
Right.
The other point, though, that I'd like to make is that in terms of getting students to enroll in Oakton out of ETHS, one is geography. We know that geography traditionally plays a role. Historically, Oakton's location is a barrier. However, I'm convinced that if more of our students understood the career pathways and certification programs that Oakton offers, then we would see more students attending and completing. But this comes down to awareness, and that's why having those every other week Monday meetings, I believe they're in the hub, in the Student Center, with Oakton representatives, really to talk to students about that opportunity. I think that's really where we'll see the growth and real career pathways. And it goes hand in hand with the Mayor's Employment Advisory Council that Oakton is also a partner in.
And to speak to the transportation, we are undertaking a transportation study. We are aware of the fact that Evanston is one of the furthest places from us in our district, and I think that by the end of this semester, that transportation study will maybe give us some ideas about what we could do to improve transportation, or what do we need to do to provide the kind of transportation that's needed or asked for by our students.
Okay.
I want to make this comment public. This is huge in terms of equity, and again, underscores the numbers the data that you just referenced, Pete, because some of that low percentage may be reflective of, because when you have to take so much remediation in college, at some point it begins to affect your eligibility for financial aid. And a lot of those students have to stop out because they can no longer finance college. So what we're doing, the partnership and what we guys are, what we're doing in identifying these deficits early on to make sure we position our students so that they can, don't have to take remediation, it has far-reaching benefits.
Mike?
I'm interested in, you made a comment about students who transfer into four-year institutions have a higher persistence rate, a better chance of graduating than students that have been there since they were freshmen. Do you have any statistics about persistence as they come into Oakton and then go on to something? Pete, this is related to the work we're doing with Northwestern, how we're using that persistence as a critical measure of how well they're prepared when they leave here, right, for success.
We do, and it's one of our wildly important goals, and is to improve semester or year-to-year persistence. So we have 2 years of a program. If you're full-time, you're going to be with us for 2 years. And we saw our persistence move from 43% it's up in our boardroom, from 43% in 2016 to 51% this year. We hope to hit 54% persistence, and that would be fall
And
to
what has
fall.
it been going further back? Is this a long-term consistent trend? Because year to year is,
Well, this has been a trend. It's
it's
been a
been a-
trend of increase every year for
Every
the
year.
past 4 years. And again, it's a very deliberate look at student success. If I could compare Oakton to the system that I was in, which was the city colleges before I came to Oakton, we were very, very focused on graduation rates, very focused on it in Chicago because they were so poor. And as a result, we saw them go up. I already see that Oakton has reached that goal, and I don't see graduation rate in their goals the way I did in the city. So graduation is happening, completion is happening at Oakton, and student success in general has very much been judged on transfer, very much, for many, many years in Oakton. And thus, we transfer more than 1,000 students in the state of Illinois every year. That's a big number, and that's why colleges pay attention to Oakton. So it has a long tradition of connection for transfer students, not necessarily who got their degree before they left. But I think at Oakton now I hear more and more people recognizing that getting that degree has value. And I can say that after many years in higher ed, I didn't hear that story all the time, that 2-year degrees have value. But I do hear that today. I hear that a 2-year degree has value because if you have a degree, there is far more likelihood you'll eventually get that bachelor's degree. Mm-hmm. That data is starting to come out in the research. Mm-hmm. So we're focused on degrees more than we ever have before. We're definitely focused on credentials. I'm looking forward to our work with Evanston on looking at students coming through Oakton and getting credentials while they're here that we can help provide.
Thank you.
Great.
I would invite you to our meetings. If you can't come to the January meeting, the February meeting is in Skokie, so I would invite any of the board members to come.
Thank you. You can send that to us. All right, well, thank you again. Thank
one of
you
our
for
board
your
members.
presentation. Yes.
I appreciate
Yes, I know, Kaya.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. So moving on with our agenda, we're going back to that item on report of the alternative schools.
And we'll go back to the Taya and Marcus show.
The Taya and Marcus show.
And thank you very much for the Oakland report.
We joked short and sweet before. Yeah, okay. So the first one maybe wasn't short and sweet. There's no video this time. But we do have some highlights that we do want to share from the alt school. And I am saying we. It's the royal we. Dr. Campbell is here to support and answer some questions at the end. This is a shorter report, but Dr. Dondalia White is unavailable this evening, and we're practicing that if you're really not feeling well, you shouldn't be at work. thing. So she really wanted to be here, and I said, "You're not well. We can't talk out of both sides of our mouths about well-being and wellness and have you come and sit here if you're not well." So I told her I would channel my inner Dr. White, and she is the Director of Student Support Services. So one of the programs that she supports is the Alt School. The Alt School is one of the many programs within Student Services. So I have the pleasure of supporting Dr. White as well as the program. And we wanted to share a few highlights and then also share some student and parent words as well. So we are very happy that when we're looking at how do we address our students' needs, that traditional school doesn't serve all students. And we're glad that we have the alternative school as an option for students, whether it's around truancy, all students who, whether it's around social emotional challenges. This is not a therapeutic milieu, but every student comes in, like Dr. Campbell said, with their own story and with their own needs. Every student who does come is coming with a credit deficiency of at least one semester, many times more. And the grade level team that consists of the counselor, the social worker, the psychologist, the AIT advisor, and the dean really come together to assess the appropriateness of the referral for students to enter into the program, and then coordinate with the student themselves as well as the family, and contract around what is the agreement of how you're going to engage within the alt school. In terms of logistics, it's worked well that we have an AM and a PM. So the AM starts during Tuesday through Friday at 8:45, so a little bit later than the typical school day, wrapping up around 11:40, and then in the afternoon, kind of similarly, starting at 1, ending at 3:55. And one of the great things about this is that our goal is for students to re-enter into the rest of the larger school environment with engaging in classes outside of the alt school. That's the ultimate goal, is helping students get back to a space where they can engage in the rest of the school. And that allows for not just classes being hybrid in terms of instruction, and we'll talk about that in a second, and written pieces, but also being able to take, okay, I've demonstrated readiness, and being able to take classes beyond the alt school. So that's a good setup. And our evening school is twice a week, and from 4 to 7. And establishing that for students who either may have stopped coming or have continued to come but are at an older age. So we're typically looking at they're past their graduation original class of, and 18 to 20-year-olds. I do want to highlight quickly just the fact that not only are the classes a hybrid, but the instructional courses are varied based on student needs. So we have work study, we have work practicum, those are all direct instruction. The life skills, which is actually a curriculum-based program through Peer Services, another community partner. Our English survey, we do all levels 1 through 4. We have world history. And then in terms of continuing to know what are the student needs who come into the program, we look at where are their deficits. And so while we've identified some of these areas, math is one of the areas that we had offered previously, and now we're seeing needs in U.S. history. So we shift it according to what those needs really look like for the students. In terms of APEX, being the programming, the curriculum that we use, we're able to support students from AP to really supporting some of our striving learner levels. And we're thinking all the time. So one of the great things is that our teachers are talking them through how to apply this to the real world experience. And that's very critical for us. When we're looking at the course offerings from English, social studies, math, science, electives, all these pieces, the depth of those is pretty intense. So I'm just going to give you a couple of examples because it covers the gamut. So for math, as an example, we have math foundations, we have algebra 1, we have geometry, we have introduction to algebra, but then we also have pre-calculus, we have AP statistics, we have financial literacy, we have personal finance and probability and statistics. So there's a variety of programming to really meet a variety of students' needs. Looking at our total 2018 graduates, we're excited to see as you can see here. 33 of the 44 students currently in the alt school are working very hard to meet their graduation deadline of May 24th so they can participate in the June graduation and wear that cap and gown. These students, really when we're thinking about all of our students completing, we have 8 students attending our evening school who anticipate on graduating then as well. So we're excited about moving forward in that way. And as we continue to look at what are our racial components, and when we isolate race, specifically looking at black males, currently we have 10 black males and 9 black females within the program. You can see that we have Latino students, both from the class of 2018 and 2017, and students who identify with more than one race as well. So in terms of time, you all probably have the picture, having gone through this many times, that one semester in a typical semester at ETHS is 8 credits. We recognize students might typically earn 16 credits in a semester. Within the alt school, we're looking at a minimum of 8 credits. And what we do is add those additional opportunities. So what that means is, since there are about 18 weeks in the semester, if a student completes a class every 2 weeks, they can earn 9 credits per semester. And at that rate, they are having that opportunity to make up credits while earning current credits from an instructional. They might have that semester-long direct instruction, a variety of classes, in addition to doing the make-up credit opportunities. What we do know is that self-directed learning is very critical for this, but we all know that we wax and wane in self-direction, that is not always consistent, and that's one of the great things about the program is there's a sense of family and community and belonging that has been built, and our teachers have been really great about coaching students through whatever kind of hiccups and hills come their way. Ultimately, the major goal of the program, as I said, is to reintegrate into the larger school environment. And as they're doing that, the exit criteria to be considered is attendance, thinking about discipline infractions, making sure there are no major infractions, minimum number of credits that they're earning each semester, and then looking at how is the dual enrollment really working. Many students who have gone through the alt school program and then began taking classes throughout the school and no longer were enrolled in alt school might still use that and have demonstrated that that had become their safe space when we talk about safe spaces, and might return to just check in even though they're not taking courses there anymore. In terms of post-high school planning, we definitely, as part of the exit criteria, all the students will do college applications. They also are working on completing their FAFSA with our College and Career Services. So we're also looking at students, many students who've been interested in the military, and making sure to both prep them and provide them the opportunity for the ASVAB. And now this is my favorite part, the student and parent feedback. As part of the exit, check out for the program whether they're integrating into the rest of the school environment or whether they're graduating. The question is, that posed to each student in written form and to the parents and guardians, what impact has the alt school program had on your education? So here's a couple of quotes. This one is from a parent or guardian. From my perspective, the alt program has been a lifesaver. I had no idea about the program, and I actually withdrew my child from Evanston Township High School. If I had known about this prior to withdrawing her from school, prior to her PHP, and prior to our failed attempt at homeschool, it would have saved our family a lot of time, energy, frustration, and money. And so from the bottom of my heart, thank you. And your staff for being there when we needed you most. Sincerely, class of 2018 parent. And that's from a parent who clearly went ahead and withdrew their student before the team could even say, no, please, we have these other plans, we can do this. And once they did reach back out, the family was, as you can tell, very grateful. We have 2 quotes from students as well, from a class of 2019 students, so a rising graduate. I like alt school because the teachers really help explain things, and I can finish my classes faster because I'm behind still. Class of 2018 student, alt school has given me something to dream about. That's why I like it. It has really helped me now, and now I can think and I can graduate. As we look forward for our Year of the Black Male, there have been a variety of both strategies and interventions, some of them including reconnecting to the rest of our school environment using a restorative justice model to help students be accountable for any harm done within the ETHS environment, as well as serving that opportunity within community services throughout our community as well as ETHS to give back. And so an opportunity was given. 10 out of the 13 students were meeting that graduation requirement, and we're looking forward to this restorative justice opportunity. And 5 of the 9 males who participated, and so that they could re-engage in things like prom, were males of color. That concludes our short but sweet alt school presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Taya. Jonathan?
3 quick questions. One is there a process for self-referral? In other words, for a student to come forward or the parents of a student to come forward and say, I think this would be best for me or for my child? Do you have that available?
We do. So it's not a formal process.
Right.
It's the student engaging either with their counselor or with their social worker with that primary point that person that they feel connected to. Sometimes we joke that people audition for programs, right? They start coming around, their friends start coming around, right? They actually start to build their own sense of community before they've officially been referred or before they've been eligible even. And right, they make themselves eligible on occasion.
But you're open to that, is the point.
We are,
Okay.
and we've engaged students in it. There have been times, though, at other times when students are self-referring, and we say, you know what, actually, I think you can use these supports. You now have another sense of community. Keep that sense of community and keep going to the classes that you have. So.
My second question is, I imagine a lot of this instruction is online.
Yes.
I mean, a higher proportion than it just has to be.
Yes, credit recovery is the
Number
basic.
of teachers and number of courses, so it has a much higher online component than.
Absolutely.
The schooling. And then the last question I had is, are there lessons you've learned at the alt school that you can bring back to the main school? That is, because you're trying different things than we traditionally, ways of educating. Are there techniques and things lessons that come out of that you say, hey, you know, we could do these more broadly?
So I'll answer that, and I'll definitely give Dr. Campbell an opportunity to do that as well. My experience, having spent time supporting all the staff, and Dr. White's office is actually in the alt school. She supports a variety of programs within student services. Her office is there. So she is a point person to help students problem solve. The 2 teachers, while there are those 2 classrooms with 2 teachers in both AM and PM, both teachers provide supports to all students. So students will often check in the other classroom because that sense of community that has been built. So in terms of lessons learned, we're a big school. And sometimes we need to make it feel smaller, not just by doing fabulous things like Post-its and sending positive messages and engaging with students, right? Not just doing that, but actually finding a way to literally make it feel smaller and make it feel safer and a little bit more structured. And that's a lot of what I think has lent to a positive success. And I will add that I think the staff know how to keep it real from accountability perspective, but also note the strengths every step of the way. So when students are moving through classes and they get passed on and they've just taken a quiz, the teachers will recognize it and recognize it to the other students, right? And say, wow, congratulations, great job. So they'll note student progress from a positive perspective, not from oh, you have this much left, let's get going. So there's that balance, I think.
I'm glad we're thinking alike on this, because I
Yeah.
would say that the lessons around personalization that we've learned from the alt school is something that we're actually taking to the other teachers at ETHS. But I would also add that we started a jobs component to this program a couple of years ago, and now our human resource department, as well as Mary Rodino, have taken that model and have started their own program where they have a job training program for
black males in school. So that was also a lesson that we learned, to say, oh, this is going really well. We should try this in another way, in another component. So that's another lesson that we've learned.
I was going to ask you how you will expand, but I'm kind of hearing what you're doing already and doing that. And
There is a need.
Yeah.
And we have, unfortunately, we have a wait list.
Yeah, I was going to say at the program.
Yeah, it is, at all times.
Jude.
In the evaluation of the referrals, is considered, because a lot of this is self-guided, which means that the reading skills have to be at a certain level. So how does that play into it in evaluating whether or not a student will be successful in a self-guided, program? And are the reading skills going to allow them to do this, to be successful with this self-guided work? Is that taken into consideration?
It absolutely is. So students actually take the test once they're in to assess what levels, right, they're going to be performing at, from AP to really some struggling, striving learners. What we have seen is that we do try to really assess what level is Apex able to support in terms of not having direct instruction. We have supported students with significant reading needs. That does take additional direct instruction, additional side-by-side. There have been times where we've had a student who was assigned a paraprofessional from special education, and we had that opportunity. But yes, in terms of both referrals, and the team regularly will sit and look at, okay, where are we at? Are we at the point of needing to consider alt school for a particular student? Because our goal is not to have to move to alt school. But when we look at that, we are going to look at what are the reading levels and the accuracy of reading levels as well, right? So we look at STAR assessments all the time. Some students who may not be in love with reading may not give their best, but some students who are really interested in an opportunity like alt school will reassess and retest, and we'll find, oh great, I think actually you are eligible. And we see that there's different capacity. So we try to help reassess, one, to make sure there's veracity and integrity of that data, and then to figure out what other supports we can do if a student really wouldn't be a good fit in that way.
Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Nice. All right. Here's my agenda. Okay, so next on our agenda is the first reading of our press policy issue number 99.
Yes, the Policy Committee of the Board met on December 7th to review the most recent policy update from Press Plus Policy Issue 99, and also district edits to Policy 520, Workplace Harassment Prohibited. This is a first reading of this policy update. The scorecard, as I like to call it, is in there, which includes the recommendations of the committee, as well as the policies, and 520 is a separate attachment in the board packet. Questions?
Any questions? You had a chance to read this, and we will.
I read every word.
Thank you, Mike. Is there in the packet anything more you'd like to say about those?
Just that we've received FOIAs from Jones and Buckwalter, and the responses are in your packet.
Okay. Did we have any board committee reports?
You know, I have just a quick comment about, we did have an EdRed meeting on Friday of last week, and I am going to share a link from the EdRed website about the presentation we had from the Illinois Department of Employment Security. Did a demo of an app that is supposed to come out sometime in the new year, which is a really amazing tool for sort of finding, for students, parents, families to use to trace a career path. What's interesting about this is the data that the Department of Employment Security has allows you to look by job category, and it gives you salary information, and it ties all that salary information to graduates of all Illinois schools, both 2-year, 4-year schools. So it's different than sort of a Naviance kind of tool or some of these other career pathway tools. Anyway, the presentation was fascinating, really interesting. I hope it gets all off the ground. I'll send you the link so that you can get a better sense of how it looks. There were lots of good questions and discussions at the program, but it was really, really terrific.
And Pat, I have a quick one too.
Okay.
I went to the Wellness Committee, which is appropriate for tonight. And it was a really interesting, very cross-sectional group of people. We also had a yoga class going on in the other half of the room, which, so wellness was really.
That's all.
But, so it was a really interesting conversation, and I think the less is more was a really good lesson that, to maybe focus, the group talked about focusing on really one thing, like maybe sleep or something, and doing like a little mini campaign through the school. And then secondly, really doing a better job of understanding communications in the building and how they connect to each other and get the word out to other colleagues as well as students, but even just having a more connected communication strategy and really understanding what's already here that they could access. So it was a really interesting conversation and very appropriate to tonight.
Yes, definitely. Great. Okay.
Couple of highlights from the Discipline Committee meeting, which was held on November 13th. A significant amount of time was spent reviewing the data, which not too long ago there was a presentation on the discipline data. What was apparent was that there was an overwhelming amount of infractions for disruptive acts and defiance of authority. What was some of the things that were talked about? One of the points that is being made about those two in particular is that they can be very subjective. And in an effort to better inform our practice and to gather data, we need to we talked about the need for a common definition of what those two mean. So thus, there's a subgroup that is going to be going through these infractions to look at the language to see if we can develop some type of like how are people interpreting these two, disruptive acts and defiance of authority. But this really echoes the presentation on student services by Marcus and Taya, just getting granular to really take a look at these numbers and why they're trending this way and have been for so long, and what adjustments can we make to better speak to actually what's happening to better inform our interventions. Also, Lisa Ransoni, she talked about, Leanna Wallace and Trinity Collins, rather, informed the team and shared their hopes of creating a space where students who have detentions could come to office hours to process the egregious behavior, seek strategies from peers, and building relationships which could help change behavior and improve school climate. So again, this is echoing the presentation we saw earlier, less punitive approach, building community, and a lot of taking a restorative justice philosophy approach of repairing whatever harm or infraction that was done in the community. So this is a great example of how we're really we're on this course of not just accepting these numbers, but trying to figure out how we can better respond to these students and the recidivism that, at times that we see.
Great.
I really hope this subgroup is successful on this definitions point about the disruptive acts and defiance of authority, because we've been talking about this as long as I've been on this board. And, you know, we did manage to get rid of inappropriate behavior, and I think that was a step forward. But we, you know, I really, you know, we need to get a handle on this, because this is such a, that subjectivity is just, it's an invitation to discriminate. And it's just, we got to get on that.
And I think this is, I'm sorry, Dr. Robinson's second year? And I've had a couple of conversations with him about that, because he is discovering what we've known, right? And trying to break that apart. And so hopefully, I'm hopeful that he will accomplish that, because that's where he goes. He just, you know, he drives into that data, and now he's talking about, now we need to understand what this is, and we need to have a definition, a clear definition across the entire school of what this means. So, and that kids know what it means, not just the, you know.
And then we can be consistent. And that keeps everybody safe.
Yeah, he's talking about it constantly.
Great, I love it.
Okay. Great. Great committee reports, seeing that there were none submitted. I'm just saying. All right. So we are at the student board report. Phoebe, you're on.
Cool. Okay. So winter break is coming up. We have 4 more days. So the student festivities have begun. So this morning, during third period, when we have our announcements, candygrams were passed out to students. Some teachers did it today, so it'll continue throughout the week. So that's always fun. And student council does a thing where they send out like a candy cane from student council to every student for inclusive purposes. But usually every student at least gets 1 candygram from another student. However, with the coming of winter break also comes kind of this crammed week of tests, quizzes, and projects, with teachers trying to make sure that students don't have any work over break, but that kind of means that the week before is where all the work happens. So it's a trade-off. So that's a little stressful, so talking about wellness. And I think that, like, yeah, I know. So this is but this is one of the few big weeks that happens, and then just this time in general, because then after break, you have that 1 week of review and then finals, and then you kind of start all over again. Anyway, so this afternoon, actually, I attended a Bequity meeting, and Bequity is the combination of band and equity. So this program was started by 2 students of color in the band program who saw a need for a space to have open discussions about race issues prevalent within like the entire fine arts department. So this particular meeting revolved around an article titled "Whiteness in Music Class," and basically discussed how exclusively Eurocentric music is explored and played in high school music classes, and how that doesn't really reflect the people in the music classes and like the society and environment that high school students encounter. So I was in the band program my freshman year. I played the tenor sax. But I left my sophomore year for like other purposes. And I can confidently say that the discussions that stemmed from this article in the 1-hour Bequity meeting were insightful and would be educational for any person, whether they were in the band program or like conscious of band in general or not. So I was really glad that I went to that. So that was this afternoon. And they have Bequity meetings, I think, once a month or maybe twice a month. So, and they there are 2 band directors at ETHS, and they both go to this meeting of like 10 students. So that's good. So more specific to student union, basically from the Witherball Forum, we have picked a few issues that we're going to be hopefully tackling this year. A few of them include the tardy policy. We were talking about detentions and how like hopefully, I know that Leon and Trinity, I think the idea of having students come to SOAR office hours is like a great alternative to detention. The tardy policy itself is one of like the most major producers of detentions because one tardy equals one detention. And so that's something that Student Union wants to take on. We've noticed that all other districts near ETHS have a one warning tardy, so that way it's not just like one tardy equals one detention, and then you have this continuous pile of detentions that doesn't really serve a meaningful purpose. You're just having detentions because you're 2 minutes late to class and your teacher makes you leave to go get a pass, and then you're 7 minutes late to class. So anyway, that's what's going on, so just look out for more updates around those issues. Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Fabulous. Thank you. Thank you, Phoebe. Thank you, Jude. Okay, Dr. Witherspoon.
Well, and you can tell the winter break is coming. My one announcement is we'll have an AP forum on Wednesday evening, and this is a great opportunity for both middle school and high schoolers to come and hear from current AP students about what it means to be taking AP classes, the support that they get, and to answer their questions about how many AP courses should you be taking and what does AP really mean. And we will be closed for 2 weeks of winter break. School gets out at 3:35 this Friday, and we'll reopen on Monday, January 7th, in time to prepare for final exams. And that concludes my report.
Great. All right. So, we are at the Finance Committee. We are now a Finance Committee, and there's an Audit Committee report, and Ms. Rodino is going to set up and get us there.
I always hate to do that during someone's presentation. I don't want to put up a graphic that you know, the numbers are so interesting, people might get distracted. Especially at 10 o'clock. Unlike my counterparts, I have very short.
And no video?
No video.
Oh.
No, it's okay.
Accountants can be creative too sometimes. Okay. We had our annual audit committee meeting on December 4th. It's not an exciting meeting, but it's always a good meeting when the news is good. So
Yes.
I'll take that for what it's worth.
Absolutely.
Boring is sometimes good in the financial world too, so. So we had our annual committee meeting where our auditors come, and we just go through some of the things, a lot of it. Jonathan, I don't remember if it was in that meeting or here where you said something like, I would like to say that it was my pleasure, but I'd be lying or something like that. So I thought that was pretty funny. So, some of it's dry, and to be honest, a lot of what we talk about is really about legislative type of stuff. So, but we go through it. It takes about an hour and 15 minutes, and we talk about some highlights in the financials and some things that we expected or didn't expect. And then the auditors talk about their audit opinion, which they used to call unqualified, which I joked that it was interesting that they've now changed that to unmodified, because when you say you have an unqualified auditor's opinion, there's something wrong with somebody somewhere. For an unqualified opinion, right. So it's now called unmodified, so that's good. But basically, it's a positive opinion that they didn't find any significant deficiencies or weaknesses or any trouble with management or staff or anything while they're digging through practically every piece of paper and digital record we have. It's a long process. Sometimes it's kind of painful. They're on site for multiple weeks. And so they kind of summarize all of that at our audit committee meeting.
We had just kind of an overview of where we stood. We had some moderate increases in revenues and expenses. If you do look at the financials, which they're like 200 and some pages, and I'm not offended when people don't read them, but there are people who read them. There's a large number that increased by a lot, and it's in the tens of millions of dollars. And it's really just an increase in what's called state retirement contributions. It's really the TRS portion. It amazes me how the number is so large. It's our portion of the overall TRS liability, even though the district will never be responsible. Well, I can't say never, but the district is not currently responsible for paying this. We're not a huge portion of TRS's overall issues, let's just say. But there's a portion of it that now in the last couple of years has been required to be on our financial statements. So unfortunately, I think when people look at it, it sort of distorts the overall numbers. So we try to discuss that in the meeting and certainly discuss it with anyone who has any questions as they do look over our basic financial statements. But other than that one, the other revenue expense categories are pretty consistent with what we've seen in the past. So the good news is the fund balance or reserves in the general, or what we call the education, which we also call the general fund, increased by approximately $1.87 million due to a couple of things, mainly. Reduction of accruals for insurance. So we've been self-insured, I don't know, 5 or 6 years or so now. And so we always are required to keep an amount in reserves for certain claims. We do have some stopgap coverage on those larger claims. But every year the auditors look at our claims experience and how much they've suggested that we keep in reserves. And so they do allow us, or actually suggest, that we can't hold too much, you can't hold too little. So we did have a release of some of those accruals this year that had been held for insurance based on our claims, so that was great news. We also had receipt of not just state, but there were actually some federal payments that were a little bit higher than expected. As you remember, especially on the state side, we've been really conservative about those state, I'm gonna still call them kind of categorical aid payments, because the state was kind of slow to pay. So other than that, we also really just try to, we come here to you when we're halfway through the year and let you know how we're doing. We try to keep tabs on things. Certainly not encourage people to use their budgets just because they need them. I don't know, it was a fight song for somebody. Yay. Maybe that's our new financial statement, fight song. So just some highlights on capital. We did have a large amount of capital spending that actually flowed over into fiscal 19. As you know, most of our capital projects kind of run over a 2-year process. We certainly had some entrance 3 expenses in fiscal 18, and most of it carried into fiscal 19. By the way, I am told that our elevator is operational with a permit and just a light that needs to be fixed in the shaft, so we're close. But we also had some large projects that were part of fiscal 18, like the ceramics lab, certainly the start of the Chem Phys lab. So we've been doing a lot of capital work here, and that was reflected on our financial statements because our amount of assets has grown. Our long-term debt was reduced by almost $2.7 million, which sounds like I'm doing a really great job, but I can't take credit for it. We actually increased our debt because we did have a bond issue, if you remember, in the spring of 2018. But what's interesting, while we battle with the TRS representation on our financial statements, the IMRF fund, which is also a state or a retirement system in the state of Illinois, became fully funded. And actually it's more than 100% funded. So it actually reduces our portion of our debt and appears as an asset on our financial statements to a certain point. So it's really interesting. We see really both sides of the spectrum on that. As far as our debt and the capital that we build from that debt, our capital needs do continue to outpace our available funds, and you all heard that last meeting when we talked about some creative ways to finance some real needs around the campus. And just as a reminder, we also transferred $1.3 million from the operations fund to the capital fund last year. That was part of that big building project for entrance 3. And so because of that, the operations fund did have a $1.3 million deficit, but it was almost the exact same number that we transferred over. Couple more slides, I think. Just a reminder, the threats, the payments are okay from the state, but they tend to voucher them and then pay them a long time after they actually voucher them, so we do still wait. One of the things that has really increased in the last few years is property tax appeals. We do see a significant amount of those granted through the county, and we do try to defend those appeals vigorously with some joint legal expenses with District 65 and some really thoughtful settlements on some of that so that we don't lose as much as people would like to have their tax bills reduced by, but we do make some concessions. And lastly, you know, TRS is just having some funding issues, and we continue to wonder how that will all shake out. And that's all I have.
Thank you. Good report, good audit. Questions? All right, thank you.
Well, I'll just reiterate, unmodified for sure. It was an excellent audit report. It was a pleasure to sit through a boring audit report, and it was a pleasure to hear the affirmations from our auditors from how they see the business and financial end of the school district is handled. And it's interesting, though, that every year there are new accounting practices. Mary talked about how they're now looking at pension liabilities even differently every single year. And so it's a moving target. And to not even this year, once in a while we get tweaked on something about, you know, you need to add another step for double checking or for monitoring certain kind of things. They have not been major, but you know, certainly good auditors are looking at every single thing. We didn't even have any of those this year. So, so it was an excellent audit. And Mary, thank you for your effort, and thank you for the report tonight.
Yes. Thank you. We appreciate the boredom. It's great. Okay. Thank you. And thank you, Dr. Witherspoon, for your comments. Okay, so we are at our actions portion of the agenda. The first action is item 14, approval of new courses, course changes, and course deletions. Can we have a motion, please?
So move.
Second?
Second?
Roll call, please.
Just, yes.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's all right. Mr. Baum,
Yes?
Mr. Laude,
Yes.
Ms. Livingston,
Yes.
Ms. Munsell,
Yes?
Mr. Metz.
Yes.
Ms. Parsons.
Yes.
Ms. Savage Williams.
Yes. Thank
Okay.
you. Next action item is approval of updated Title I school-wide plan. It's in our packets. Can I have a motion, please?
So moved?
Second?
Roll call, please.
Can I ask just a question about
Certainly,
this?
yes.
So, in the Title I plan, you describe the various programs that are being used to address the needs of particularly students challenged by poverty. And there's a description of the various programs. One of the most prominently described is Wild Kid Academy. And I'm a big fan of Wild Kid Academy, but the plan says that it asks, what are you doing to measure the effectiveness of the programs that you're using the Title I funds for? And it says, with regard to Wild Kid Academy, we will examine the following data for growth and improvement. Improvement in grades, curriculum mapping, and design aligning activities with Common Core standards, and standardized test score comparison, particularly for reading. And the only thing I've ever seen for Wild Kid Academy are attendance figures. I've never seen any data along those lines, like how are kids who do Wild Kid Academy doing compared to kids who don't do Wild Kid Academy? Do we have numbers like that?
When we look at Wildcat Academy, we look at the kids, for example, we look at a number of our kids who are struggling, particularly, let's say, they're black males. So we're tracking the kids, the black males who attended Wildcat Academy, and how their grades have shifted and how they've changed. We started an executive functioning component to Wildcat Academy, so we're tracking those kids and how their grades. And so what the programs that we're using for Wildcat Academy, we're not necessarily comparing the kids who don't attend, but the kids that do attend, how are they faring better in their classes?
Okay, well, to the extent that we're measuring those numbers as we're saying we are for the federal grant, I just think it would be nice to share them with the board.
Sure, we can do that. Okay.
Thanks. Okay, I'm done.
Okay, we have a motion on the table. Roll call, please.
This is the Title I one, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Mr. Baum,
Yes?
Mr. Laude,
Yes.
Ms. Livingston.
Yes.
Ms. Monsell,
Yes?
Mr. Metz,
Yes.
Ms. Parsons,
Yes.
Savage Williams.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next item is acceptance of fiscal 2018 audit report.
Move approval?
Second?
Roll call, please.
Mr. Baum,
Yes?
Mr. Laude,
Yes.
Ms. Livingston.
Yes.
Ms. Monsell,
Yes?
Mr. Metz,
Yes.
Ms. Parsons,
Yes.
Ms. Savage Williams.
Yes. Okay. The next item is adoption of 2018 tax levy.
Wait,
So moved?
Second?
Roll call, please.
tax levy. Mr. Baum,
Yes?
Mr. Laude,
Yes.
Ms. Livingston,
Yes.
Ms. Monsell, sorry,
Yes.
Mr. Metz,
Yes.
Ms. Parsons,
Yes.
Ms. Savage Williams.
Yes. The next item is approval of capital improvements program.
Motion to approve?
Second?
Roll call, please.
Mr. Baum,
Yes?
Mr. Laude,
Yes.
Ms. Livingston,
Yes.
Ms. Monsell,
Yes?
Mr. Metz,
Yes.
Ms. Parsons,
Yes.
Savage Williams.
Yes. The next item is approval of resolution approving emergency expenditure of funds for coil steam.
So moved?
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Baum,
Yes?
Mr. Laude,
Yes.
Ms. Livingston,
Yes.
Ms. Monsell,
Yes?
Mr. Metz,
Yes.
Ms. Parsons,
Yes.
Ms. Savage Williams.
Yes.
Okay.
Next is the consent agenda, which consists of approval of minutes from November 12th, 2018, and November 12th, 2018 closed session minutes, meetings, and November 12th, 2018 regular meeting. Approval of bills, personnel agenda, appointments to staff, certified support, safety, operations, and nutrition, change in status, salary adjustment, change in position, operations, and stipends, leave of absence, maternity, paternity, certified support staff, resignation, certified support staff, retirement, revised, certified.
So moved?
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Baum,
Yes?
Mr. Laude,
Yes.
Ms. Livingston.
Yes.
Ms. Monsell,
Yes.
Mr. Metz,
Yes.
Ms. Parsons,
Yes.
Ms. Savage Williams.
Yes. Thank you. So we are at old and new business. Is there old or new business? Hearing none. I would like to just wish everybody a happy and safe winter break. And this meeting.
Well, can I shout out Phoebe? So Phoebe and I participated in the hiring panel for the police chief, as well as Jaheem, right? But Phoebe and I, we were in the same group, so I got to witness her greatness. And I just want to say that she represented well. She added questions, she dug deep. She put them all, I won't say on the front line, but, no pun intended, but she made sure that the student perspective and student voice of Evanston was fully represented. And it was just a pleasure to watch her just fall right in line, like no fear, full of confidence, among other community leaders in that space. And she did a very good job assessing who is now our current police chief. So I couldn't end this year without recognizing
That's awesome.
her.
Congratulations, Cindy.
Yeah. She blew me away.
That's great.
And I think I'm pretty good at how, but she blew me away.
She's good.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Good job.
All right, thank you, thank you. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Happy winter break.